Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Keith Kern of Superior is a Republican running in the 73rd Assembly District. The election is November 3. Keith, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it, Steve.
My first question is this. You say on your campaign website that you made hundreds of calls to the Department of Workforce Development trying to get unemployment benefits. Two questions. Did you ever get the benefits? And is that a major reason why you're running for the Assembly?
Yeah, there are two parts to that. Obviously being a small business owner is a little more difficult as far as the unemployment system and how it's all structured. So me personally, I made hundreds of phone calls every single morning. I don't understand exactly why the office opens at 7:05, but I woke up every morning at about 6:45 and put it in speed dial and made hundreds of phone calls every single morning with no luck getting through. Some days you can look through my phone log, it was 300-400 calls just trying to get through. And luckily, the system did finally catch up a bit. I understand it was overwhelming, but I was able to collect some of what was, supposed to be determined mine as far as unemployment. It was nowhere near what, some other people got the way it was structured as, a sole proprietor or anything like that. But it was frustrating, and I was receiving phone calls from many constituents that I serve on city council trying to help them out as well. I had a neighbor that didn't have internet access and had trouble getting through, and helped him at least file his claims and get into the process as well. So it was very cumbersome, and I was a little disappointed with the way that, it was all handled. I think that we had the opportunity to take other employees that might not have been currently working or furloughed and being able to transfer them or train them and be able to get them up to speed to handle some of these claims. So hopefully learn from these mistakes and we move forward and we're able to put something together if this was to ever happen again, so people don't struggle. Weeks upon weeks of people not getting a paycheck, wondering how they're going to pay their mortgage, how they're going to pay the rent, how they're going to put food on their tables. I mean, it was definitely worrisome for a lot of people.
Well, let's keep talking about some pandemic issues. State Senate Republicans would like to convene and overturn the governor's statewide mask edict. What's your position on the mask edict?
Well, just like I don't suppose the mask mandate on the state level, I didn't support it on a local level. There was just too much enforcement, gray area, too cumbersome. How you're going to hold some people accountable and other people accountable. It kind of reminds me back of the shutdown of what businesses were considered essential and which ones weren't. Every business is not ran the same way. I own a small tavern up in northern Wisconsin, and if you're going to potentially hold my license accountable for how I'm trying to operate, and then the wording is so vaguely written, and now you're making my employees, myself, when I'm bartending, be the judge and jury of who may have underlying condition and might not be required to wear it, who's watching, who's going to call in. It just makes it more and more difficult. Now, I understand in some areas in the state where, the pandemic was really the epicenter of what was going on. I understand where, you might want to take a little bit more action in those areas. But up here in northern Wisconsin, we didn't really see the cases and what's going on. We've done a really good job of controlling coronavirus at this point. And I think business owners are doing everything that they can to make sure that they maintain that they're open. I know in our industry, the bars are the cleanest that they've ever been. Not to mention we were shut down for 3.5 months. Everybody did repairs to their businesses. They cleaned up. They did everything they can. It's an amazing experience to be able to come back to a lot of these establishments and see some of the progress of what they've done. And just to hamper each individual business and doing it in a separate way, a one-size-fits-all approach to me just doesn't work. Now, we need to be smart about it. We need to wash our hands. We need a social distance. And I do encourage wearing masks when possible. But like I said, just a one-size-fits-all just doesn't work, in my opinion.
Okay, let's talk about if the pandemic causes state tax collections to fall in the current budget year by $1 billion, $1.5 billion. Should we raise taxes and fees, or should we cut spending, Keith?
We need to cut spending. We cannot be raising taxes during this time. There was a report that just came out. Luckily, we got through the first year, and the sales tax was a little greater than what we thought. That's due to a strong market and a strong economy through the first part of the fiscal year. But now we're going in and seeing the true effects of what this could lie, and we need to make sure that we live within our bounds. We're asking citizens of the state of Wisconsin to live within their bounds. We've always been taught it in school. Make sure that you live within your own budget. We've witnessed this in the past where, people get upside down with their mortgages. So how do we expect citizens to go along with us or the state not controlling their spending? There's opportunities that could come along that should have been looked at as far as freezing the second year spending. I know I read an article in late May that the governor had proposed cutting state spending or state government spending by 5%, but then went on to exempt 25 different agencies. Now, I understand every agency in Wisconsin is important and they play a vital role, but to exempt 25 of those agencies when we're trying to cut 5% of the overall spending to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible, it just reminds me once again of the shutdown, what's essential and what's not.
Yesterday, State Senator Kappinga from Southeast Wisconsin offered a bill saying, if you're a business or an organization and you've complied with CDC guidelines on COVID to protect your customers and employers, you should be exempt from being sued. Do we need a state law like that?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, this is a pandemic that you can't control. It has no boundaries. It has no walls. Everybody's doing everything that they can. And just to get into a situation where that you could possibly be sued, to me, is just, it's not right.
And one more pandemic questions. We've seen the role that hospitals in Wisconsin and nationally have played treating COVID-19 patients. If you're elected voting on the next state budget, should hospitals be an even greater priority than they might be in the current budget?
I believe that they should be. I mean, hospitals and care, they've done an amazing job to this point in helping play their role in controlling this virus. So definitely it needs to be on the table to look at to see what we can do for the hospitals, especially in the rural area.
What's your position on legalizing recreational and medical marijuana?
I think we should legalize it. We should tax it.
Okay, fair enough. This fight in the Capitol over who should draw the next congressional and legislative district lines. The Constitution says the party in power. The governor's proposed the People's Maps Commission. Who's right?
Your answer or your question answers it. The Constitution. The Constitution states that the legislature shall draw the lines. And if we need to change that, then it needs to be addressed in the means in which it's written in the Constitution to be able to change. Now, I'm running in northern Wisconsin, and I would love to have a square box where I know every single boundary, but I'm going to do my best to hit every square inch of this county, knocking on every single door in this district and make sure that we do our job.
Are you familiar with the governor's 9-bill package on policing reforms? He called a special session. Republican legislators said we're going to study the issue. Do you know enough about his proposals to say whether you could support him, Keith?
I know some of it. I believe 3 of the issues that I'm aware of are the no-knock warrants.
Yes.
I don't believe that those should be banned. I believe that they play a key role in protecting officers when they're going into situations. Plus, they have a second line. When you go in for a warrant, you have to go through a judge, and then you have to determine, and show probable cause of why that warrant is deemed necessary. So there's a chain of command there, and it's a tool that needs to stay in the toolbox. As far as the chokeholds. Yeah, I mean, I talked to our local law enforcement with everything that's going on and kind of asked them their questions and, their opinions of what's going on. And both our sheriff's department and our local police department, they don't even train that. It's not in any of their curriculum. It's not in any of their training. The only time that I'd see it deemed necessary, but like in the last effort where life is at danger. So, and at that point, it's anything, you got to do what you got to do to make sure that officer stays safe and controls the scene. And I think the last part was the uniform training. That's already basically in there. And if we're going to require more state training, that's great. I think it's great that all of our officers are trained to the highest level we can, producing the best officers that Wisconsin can offer. But being on the city council on a local level, I see firsthand through the finance department how that training impacts our budget. So if we're going to talk about increased training statewide and requirements, then that needs to be looked at as possibly funding through a state level to be able to backfill that. You can't leave these local municipalities out to dry.
Okay, let's talk about property taxes in Wisconsin, which is high, which is why people like you serving on the city council, you have to live with property tax caps and limits. They've been around more than 20 years. If you're elected voting on the next state budget, would you vote to keep those property tax caps and limits in place or get rid of them?
As far as the levy limits and all that?
Yeah, on property taxes.
Yeah, obviously being a city councilor and then also a resident within the city that you're representing, it's a delicate tightrope that you walk. Those levy limits are important to make sure that our citizens can, afford to live within our area. So those limits have to stay in place.
What about alternative sources of revenue? Do local governments like the city of Superior, do you need to consider more alternative sources of revenue to reduce your reliance on the property tax? Absolutely.
We need to be creative 24/7. I'm constantly looking at different avenues to try to bring in more revenue to our city and work with our city council, work with our planning department. There's an expo district that we've been trying to get up in northern Wisconsin for almost 6 years now. And yes, as a Republican, it does increase the taxes of 0.5% on prepared food and beverage. But being that that's my industry, I absolutely support that because that is bringing in tourism. That's bringing in revenue to the city that normally wouldn't be here. And, I've had this discussion with other people, other colleagues within my industry, and they were kind of hemming and hawing with it. But, you're down in Madison, we're in northern Wisconsin. We have 2.5 months more of winter, and people don't really like to leave their house sometimes in the middle of winter. Now, if this expo center can bring people out in the middle of winter, whether it's a convention going on or a concert, it gets them out. They're going to spend money in the winter when they normally have hunkered down. So that first and foremost is something that I'd like to see get pushed through if elected, is getting that expo district done, and then working with our city and our city council to make sure that we can find a private partner to be able to get that facility built. I think it's key to northern Wisconsin.
Last year, Governor Evers recommended raising the gas tax. It's now 30.9 cents. It hasn't been raised 10 or 12 years to stabilize highway funding. Would you vote to raise the gas tax, Keith?
I'd have to read into that a little bit more. I'm not prepared to answer that question.
Okay. Let me ask you this about local control. When a school board or a local government plans a major public works project, should they have to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses? And the reason I ask is a study found that in 2015, out-of-state contractors on public works projects got $72 million in contracts, but that more than doubled to 146 in 2018. Local governments like Superior City Council have to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses?
I like keeping things local, obviously, as being a small business owner locally. But once again, we have a project that is budgeted and it needs to get done within that budget. So I would love to encourage hiring of in-state contractors, but if the budget doesn't allow for it to happen, then we have to go to our secondary source.
Okay, just two final questions. We've talked about a lot of issues. Any other issues important to your campaign that we haven't hit on yet?
I think northern Wisconsin is ready for a change. I'm going to be that strong voice to go down to Madison and make that strong choice and make sure that I represent northern Wisconsin to the fullest extent. Madison sometimes I think overlooks northern Wisconsin, overlooks Superior in the areas within the district. So we need that strong voice down in Madison to bring a strong leadership back home.
And last question, you want to highlight any differences between you and the incumbent that you're running against?
I'm young and I work hard and I'm not afraid to go after it. Currently right now I'm operating a business. I'm on city council. I'm trying to race cars. I'm building a house. I'm doing all this in the midst of a campaign. I'm not afraid to work.
Thank you. Keith Kern of Superior is a Republican candidate in the 73rd Assembly District. The election is November 3. Keith, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Absolutely, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Stay safe, man. Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.